For far too long, we were a very, very defensive nation where we thought uh, we don't need to have very strong armed forces. We are good enough, just that we can repel a few wars. That's about it. But today, with the building confidence, we also understand that the danger is not only from your surroundings. You have to have a say. You have to have much stronger technology, and you have to have technology of your own.
How the military, the bureaucracy, and the political leadership does not talk to each other, and analyzes the reasons of how what are the different power plays and how it has impacted the growth of the defense industry in the from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s, and now coming to the early 2000s.
So it's the same machinery which is being used in the civil world. There's no difference. Only thing that changes is the quality requirement. Because we can't have a failure at a wrong time and away in the battle zone, because that could be a difference between life and death there.
So very good afternoon to all our viewers. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining our esteemed panel. This is the episode 2 of Role of Make in India and Indian Entrepreneurs in the India-Pak conflict and the road ahead. We are joined by our esteemed panelist. We have Mr. Raj Setia, who's the CEO and founding partner for Mount Tech Ventures. Then we have Commander Navneet Kaushik. He's ex-Navy. He has been with the TDB and also the founding partner for Jamwant Ventures. And thank you, Mr. Amnish Patnaik, joining us from. He is the chief representative of CII Singapore, and he has been with SIDM as the chief of international relations. So welcome to this second episode, and this session is all about the financing of deep tech, the financing of innovation and new initiatives starting. So we'll start with Mr. Setia. Mr. Setia, can you just tell us about the journey of how did you come about, Mount Tech Ventures? How did the idea initiate? What was the need that you felt to start Mount Tech Ventures? Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Duke, and thank you, Sangam Talks, for inviting me for this wonderful discussion. And I hope to be able to add a little bit of value to everybody who is listening to this, as much as I hope to gain a lot from the insights that you are able to bring to the fore. To give you some bit of backdrop to how and why Mount Tech Growth Fund exists. Yeah, so of course, all of us were at different stages of the journey in our careers, and I'll not go into our personal, ambitions and aspirations. But to cut it short, a bunch of us who had done reasonably well in their respective streams, had complementary skill sets, had a common cause that we all identified with, and that was, what is it that we could do to support India's Atmanirbharta in critical tech arenas, where India's economic progress had to be supported with enough defense and and safety mechanisms, so that people could not hold India to ransom in the future. Because as you grow as an economy, your economy is also under threats, partly because others don't want to see you grow, partly because the size and scale automatically creates enemies in every possible sphere. And when we looked at the larger ecosystem of what critical technologies was, while we talk about defense, we all of us brainstormed and decided that we need to redefine what national security means, because the paradigm of warfare, paradigm of attack, paradigm of paralyzing the other country was no longer something that happened across borders alone. It happened well beyond borders. It could happen through multiple means and channels. And technology, like historically we have known, the countries that have had the best technology, or the kingdoms that have had the best technology, has always ruled for the period they were able to establish their technological supremacy. You can go back to the history, you can go back to European history, British history, American history, and the present. And hence, there's no surprise that there's so much of hype and hoopla and fight around technological supremacy, because everybody wants to lead the next gen technologies. Now, if India has to grow as a power, India has to protect its interests. And going by the hypothesis I just shared, it has to be independent and self-dependent in technological arenas where others can stymie your growth and puncture your trajectory. So critical technology that way became important, and we saw a clear tailwind in terms of what the government was trying to do, which was very, very welcome, and it was also executed very well, or gradually getting executed very well. So decided to define for the fund what we thought critical technologies were for India's sovereignty.
Just one small question that came into my mind, that this era is era of VCs and startups, and we having startup Mahakumbh, and we having multiple initiatives. How did your journey begin from investment into deep tech? Because there is still a very sizable number of people I can count on hand who are investing in dev tech. So what convinced you, or what had your attention?
So coming back to where I left, so it was clear that there were technologies that had to be supported, and in a manner that that encouraged people to build businesses around those. So defense, aerospace, space, digital communications, critical minerals, critical and advanced materials, cybersecurity, and broadly these areas, if you see in some way or the other, are falling in the broader ambit of what national security and critical technologies are, where you could literally lose or win a war. I mean, you've seen what has happened recently. You saw what happened in Indo-Pakistan war. And you also saw, not related to it, but Chinese ban on exports of rare earth magnets. And so all of these can be disruptive as much as a yesteryear war could have been. And hence, India needs to protect itself. And similarly, you could have a cybersecurity threat coming to our power plants, our nuclear plants, our surveillance systems, and so on and so forth. However, we also, while on one hand you had this tailwind where government wanted Atmanirbharta, government wanted private ecosystem to develop, government wanted innovation to happen through private sector enterprise, because historically we've been a TOT country for defense and critical techs, where we just license technology and manufacture and assemble here, not to show any disrespect to people who are doing it. So we thought, time is ripe. India needs it. There's a fair amount of tailwind for long term. India has a strong foundation for engineering software, which is becoming increasingly software development, which is becoming increasingly a part of all deep tech activities. Whatever you do, you have AI and software, which is where India has a lot of historical strength. And then there was a very sizable Indian market. So we said, if this opportunity cannot be tapped in India commercially, then where it can be? I mean, it has to be India, given its size of budget, as well as its relationship all over the world to export, plus its technological prowess, compared to a lot of other countries who could be pariahs in terms of export basis, like Russia or China, without getting into details. So then we also realized, while the government was doing its bit, there was a huge gap in terms of what government was doing initially to provide grants to a lot of these startups through IDEX programs and so on and so forth, to all the way to scaling up. So there was not enough funding available in the private space, not enough institutional funding available, which could actually help these businesses convert from great projects to great companies. So which is where we saw an opportunity for VC money to come in, much like what it has done in the US and Israel, to a large extent in China in pockets, and a lot of other countries, but not too many you can count because of India's size, scale, and opportunity. So that's when we thought we'll build a fund. We'll build a fund which will bridge this gap at early stage and prepare these companies for scaling up. We'll support them through a platform that we have very painstakingly created through a set of in-house capabilities, as much as external support and ecosystem partnerships. And that's where we are at. And luckily, we got great support from the kind of investors we were seeking money from. We exceeded our target. We eventually, and it's a happy problem to have. We had to expand the size of our pool because the opportunity was larger. So,
I'd like to go back to my question again because this is a very curiosity-driven question, and I think this is a question which is it's there in the air, but it's not really frequently asked. You are the early bloomers in Deftech space, so very rare people, and for the sake of kindly pinpointing that, what exactly were the emotions and how did you get to associate yourself, because we still are struggling, we still are counting on FDI in defense. We are talking about 100% FDI, and I think the SAP plant which has been there making the Carl Gustav launchers is 100% FDI is the first. And we are doing FDI because in-house capital, this has been the question. So why is there not too many people in the Deftech VC room?
See, the single largest challenge in the VC world is, as you rightly said, much like FDI in industry, there's a huge amount of FDI dependence in the VC world as well. A lot of money that comes into venture kind of funding is overseas money, and they have their own limitations or reservations for legacy reasons, of course, more often than not, in investing at what is called pure play defense tech company. Traditional models will tell you that a single customer risk is huge. Anything which depends on a single customer or single procurement dependence makes a venture risky. So you don't get the right exits and multiples. People will say single country dependence is huge. Single use case dependence is is a huge risk, so on and so forth. But over time, and they have their own limitations from the LPs that they have, who do not want to take an exposure to a sector like this.
I'll go to Commander Kaushik, and this from where we are taking this, that to make it lucrative for the LPs, how have you been looking into this picture, and what makes you think that? Again, the question is that there are very few people in this Deftech VC room. So, Commander Kaushik, how do you see it? And you've been into the thick of the things, you've been into those committees looking at huge investments in defense, and you've seen probably the micro gaps in the system. So what has been your story on this?
See, my understanding of this ecosystem is because for a very long duration, defense was more or less opaque. People didn't know what's happening inside. There was no use cases which was coming from inside, that what does the defense needs. Unlike the West, where there's a huge, industry, academia and defense collaboration, which wasn't there in India at the early stages. With now the success of the venture funds and the, the other sectors, people have started looking at defense. And for the credit of the Ministry of Defense, they have started opening up. They have started having conversations. The programs like IDEX, Aditi, from DIO, these things are very helpful for the technologists to understand that what is required to be made. And then there's an understanding that everything which is happening in the economy comes under the umbrella of a security establishment. Mm-hmm. And unless that security establishment is, strong, everything is at a risk, which we realized at a time when Operation Sindoor happened, right? The markets were uncomfortable. You don't know how long it's going to last. And like current geopolitical scenarios. So everything comes from that aspect, that defense becomes very important if you have to protect your economy. At the end of the day, most of the wars are about economies.
So I have a question, and if we can bring this up, your LPs, what is the background of your LPs? Are they investors in technology, investors in IT, AI, bandwagon, and then they saw that you have been serving the defense services, and the scientific side, the investment side of it. So what is the convincing line that got your LPs to be working with Jamwant Ventures?
See, for me, what understanding is simple. Like, I don't see anything called a defense tech. I see a tech which has a defense use case.
Oh, that's wonderful, yeah.
right? Because if you traditionally go back and see, if you are talking about a pager, like which was extensively used in anti-terrorist operation, it wasn't a high-tech thing for today's world, but the way they integrated, the solution which came was something which was innovative. So you're looking for innovation. So it's not about tech. Secondly, coming to, we talk about defense tech. I'm saying why people talk about defense tech, because defense is always going to make something which is niche. If you're going to play a catch-up game, you're never going to be ahead. So if you see world over, the best tech starts from defense. You look at satellite imaging, you look at GPS. Today your life is there in your day-to-day life. But when it started with a very, very specific use case in defense. And had this technology started for a civil use case, adoption would have taken a much longer time. It would not have been profitable. But in defense, you need to have a cutting edge over your adversary, so you're willing to pay for it.
So, Commander Kaushik, I have a question. Like GPS came from what NASA was developing, a lot of technologies, so now whole of applications like Uber or what we have, the grocery delivery, every kind of delivery integrator platform is dependent on GPS, which came as a need out of a space agency trying to do whatever it was doing. So do you think it's an era of transitioning where defense wanted something to be done, and as you rightly mentioned, as I grasp it, is that technology is now having defense use cases. So is this an era of transition, and has there been a starting point of how this transition started to roll out, if my presumption is correct? And you being at the technology development board, did you see certain instances of where you could pick up a civil technology and ask those people to give trials with a certain tweaking? Has there been such instances where the defense requirement went from defense to defense only companies like big contractors, for example, in US, but in India also this is the second case? The Tatas started making probably passenger cars, same with Mahindras, and then they started making armored vehicles, and then they went into deep. So the trend probably is that defense contractors like Northrop Grumman or Rockwell Collins or Lockheed Martin, they were defense contractors always making Deftech. Here in India, we kind of are on a reverse trend, commercial civil technologies and then defense applications. Is there a identifiable trend or identifiable wave?
See, there is definitely a focus on defense now, and yes, because people have made a lot of money in the other sectors, now they understand the importance of defense. So that is how it's coming up now. But more importantly, what I believe is it's a change of mindset. Like for far too long, we were a very, very defensive nation where we thought we don't need to have very strong armed forces. We are good enough just that, we can repel a few wars, that's about it. But today with the building confidence, we also understand that the danger is not only from your surroundings. You have to have a say, you have to have much stronger technology, and you have to have technology of your own. Because like what Raj was mentioning, that if you just shut down a tap on some particular material or a technology, then you're stuck. And if that is done in a crucial point of time, let's take it simple satellite imaging, right? If you don't have your satellite imaging and you're dependent on someone else to give you that satellite imaging, they will still deliver you, but they will not deliver you at the critical time. They must just deliver you need it in, let's say, 5 hours, he can deliver you in 3 hours, but he'll give you in 18 hours. What can you do about it?
So that's a tactic in itself.
Yeah, that's a warfare. That's how things are done at a lot of times. That's something which happens. People may not talk about it. But that's typically, unless you have your control, you are never going to be independent.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Patnaik, coming to you on questions on same lines. That and as Commander Kaushik sir helped me to refine my understanding that India was far too long only buying jets from helicopters from US, jets from France, and then drones from Israel. We were primarily buying, the whole idea of having in-house manufacturing other than the DPSUs started gathering momentum little later. So is there a bearing on Western countries having already very matured defense contractors who are on the lead of innovations, and India where innovation was given a defense user case? And since you have been at the very foundation level of SIDM, also tell us that what role did SIDM, what was the origin? How did SIDM came into being? Was there some kind of a balancing act between, India versus developed nations, and what was the vision of this institution?
Thanks, Duke, and happy to hear the other panelists and their viewers as well. A couple of things. First is on your question of whether the Western countries on their maturity and the other things, and development of our own fighter aircrafts, engines, and all. There's a wonderful book that I would encourage all of your readers to read. It's by Abhijit Mukherjee, if I correctly recall. It's called The Absent Dialogue. Essentially, he talks about how the military, the bureaucracy, and the political leadership does not talk to each other, and analyzes the reasons of what are the different power plays and how it has impacted the growth of the defense industry from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s, and now coming to the early 2000s. A wonderful piece of literature. He was a former major, now is at King's College London, I think. So just taking cue from what Abhijit was saying on that. See, in the 60s and 70s, we did have a fighter development program, Marut, which was being developed by HAL for various reasons. I won't go, of course, into the details of that. But that program and the other parts did not take off, and eventually the Air Force had to start buying the MiGs. That was the reason I'm sharing this example is in our leadership and our political spectrum, there was a thought of developing our own weapons and systems because of some of our own internal issues and problems, and here and there we were not able to mature it, and that's why we had to buy. There's also a political angle to it also, where we still have the element of socialism, of course, existing in our political leadership, where it was, as the commander was saying, that we were not a defense country, and it was reflected in our political leadership as well. Just I think yesterday or day before, I was watching this clip of Minister Chidambaram in Parliament saying that we must not be a nuclear nation. Right, and we must not have nuclear weapons, while the Vajpayee government was planning all these, while they were planning our nuclear tests. So these are a function of a democracy. I'm very proud that we actually do this, right? In our parliament, we actually debate and go ahead with all these stuff rather than jumping across. So in our system, there was always a thought that we must not be a very armed or nation, and we must not talk about all these things as well. So that has an effect on how these development procedures and all the other things actually get impacted, because all of these things have to be led at the political level. Now, coming to why SIDM. See, in 2014, when the current government took over, so there was, of course, a push towards indigenization and defense manufacturing. While it was not the case in the previous Congress government, and I'm not being political at all, just stating facts. But what was felt in that moment of time was that there are multiple associations in the country. You have a CII, you have a FICI, you have an ASSOCHAM, all of them coming together and saying the same things. It was not done in a very coordinated manner. So credit to Mr. Manohar Parrikar, who analyzed this problem and suggested that for the defense industry to grow, there must be a single organization outside of the government, a non-profit, which represents the defense industry as a whole, not only representing the concerns of the industry, but also working with the ministry on various issues related to technology development, investing, startups, and so on and so forth. So it was supposed to be a one-stop shop for the ministry, for the armed forces, everything related to defense. It took some time. It took a couple of years, and SIDM formally came into being in 2018. So CII always had the leadership of doing programs and running these committees with the armed forces and the MOD. Just a small snippet. When we were having issues with our Russian spares in 1995, so the army actually reached out to CII in 1995 to do the first Indian Army Industry Conclave. That was the first time in India's history that a private association and industry institution was working with the army. So we always had that history with us, and of course I won't go into detail on what we have done, but essentially we had the bandwidth to undertake that job. So CII closed down its defense team and complete and opened a separate body, Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. And the reason why it was called society was because it was supposed to act as a consultant, as an advisor to the MOD, not as an association. Otherwise, we could have called it Indian Defense Association. There's a difference in nomenclature to that. So that's why the term society was made. So CII closed down its defense charter and created this new body. I was one of the first persons to be recruited into that into the new society. I was employee 001. So when we started, we had about 100 odd members who had joined in, and as of now, when I see, we have 700 members in. So that's 700 Indian companies, formal Indian companies in the defense manufacturing sector. It's a huge jump. It has taken some time. As any new organization, there are hurdles as it grows, and which is fair, and we have grown in that hurdle. But that was the concept behind as to why SIDM was set up, and I'm very proud to sort of share that we are a unique organization in India. No other organization like this exists compared to Europe and Americas, where they have land, naval, air force, different associations. But in India, it's all combined into one. So there's a lot of knowledge and I wouldn't say influence, but of course access towards various systems. We have an MOU with Army, Navy, Air Force, MOUs with other associations around the world. I think now we are 10 or 11 or so. So the industry is really taking ground in that way.
See, this is all about good questions. I think such discussions are all about having good questions, because good questions they brainstorm to good ideas and good solutions, and then good institutions are probably a renewed way of looking at institutional working. You just mentioned that the previous regime, an honorable member of the previous government, he said that India doesn't need to be a nuclear force, right? And now we are talking about defense industrial complexes. So like one of them is in Tamil Nadu, the other one is in UP, and then there are more defense oriented parks and the ecosystem. So one thing is that, was there an era where we left a big opportunity while the whole world in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the US space program and the partnerships in US and European Union, the space partnership started 1970s onwards. Because of this, did we lose a big opportunity to make ourselves an industrialized nation, and we could have been probably in a higher state of industrial footprint, making us less import dependent? This is my question, that from that era to this era where we are talking about defense industrial corridor, is there a huge shift? And what has been the role of CII/SIDM in kind of putting all these loose threads together? Also tell us something about mobilization of funds, investments, where this session is mostly pointing towards the investments in deep tech. So how did that transition came into being? How did it got accelerated in last one decade? What was the role of SIDM? And as one of the initial thought leaders, what new will you propose for SIDM to keep growing and fulfilling its obligatory duties?
Right. Thanks, Duke. On the first one on opportunity, I would just like to again take a snippet from Dr. Naushad Forbes' book, The Struggle and the Promise. Dr. Naushad Forbes was an earlier CII president and, of course, is the chairman of Forbes Marshall. He wrote a book in 2022, The Struggle and the Promise. So he points out over there that India is, I may be wrong in the verbatim words, but he says that India is very good at snatching failure from the jaws of success. So in the past 60, 70 years, we have had multiple amounts of opportunity where we could have actually gone ahead and we could have become a major defense powerhouse. But we did not for various reasons. Again, not going to detail into why, what, or how. That's another podcast altogether. But we did not do that. Now coming to for the role of SIDM and or around funds and everything. See, the good part about our system was that someone actually recognized this need of a separate association, and it got created because there was political will, political intent, and industrial intent also. So SIDM is completely industry led. It's industry funded. We don't get any support from the government at all. Right? We generate our own funds, our own money, and we execute our own programs. CII is a different ballgame altogether because it's an 125-year-old institution. So CII is very strong that way. 9,000 members, and all. It's a system that runs on its own. But SIDM, it's a separate body altogether, separate board, separate governance. We need to actually create our own funding and processes. So that is more, of course, to SIDM, and we have been doing well because the money is generated through our membership. But coming to now the role of funds that you asked. See, in the ministry and through our conversations in the last 6-7 years, there was, of course, a lot of discussion on how funds should be utilized. And through those discussions, IDEX was eventually created. That, this is how government should spend its money, and that is how it was funneled into IDEX. But the way the startup ecosystem actually functions and the way venture capitalist actually functions, the synchronization of how the ministry thinks and how the ecosystem thinks is still evolving, in my opinion. When we started in 2018-19, it was at a very, very raw stage, and there were issues during that point. At this stage, 7 to 8 years down the line, in my opinion, things can be better, but at least there is some momentum around it. Our startups need more money than the 10 crores that ITEX gives. Plain and simple. In the defense industry, 10 crores is nothing. You at least need 15, 20, 25 crores because of the scale and the military application that is there and the technology that is there that is required to produce a good product. So, that is. So on the role of SIDM as of now, I feel as we are very good as interlocutors, connecting various startups and ecosystems and MOD and everyone. But I think creating those hard-hitting dialogues where the issues that are hurting the startups, issues that are hurting the MOD, is where those closed door dialogues should happen. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, it's not that we must advertise these dialogues, but these dialogues should happen in closed door environments so that we actually hear each other's problems out and actually come to a conclusion. Coming to the future of things, I feel in terms the society should be self-funded. The reason all all other foreign organizations, the reason why they also maintain their independence is because of the funding. I'm not saying that we are not independent right now, but there are certain initiatives and certain programs that we still rely on membership funds, on industry funds, which as a non-profit, we have to follow that. But if there was more independent funding sort of also being generated, I would definitely like for SIDM to have its own researchers, for SIDM to have its own associates writing articles, creating all these hard-hitting dialogues. At this point, we are not doing it as we were supposed to, but I hope we should be able to do that.
So I thank you for those interesting inputs, especially the last part, the research part, where I was discussing with Commander Kaushik, and I think briefly also with Mr. Setia, that we need agencies like OECD who have mapped the industrial footprint very well, and with this mapped industrial footprint they are able to see the gaps in the any requirements, especially in cross disciplinary domains. Defense is also a big cross disciplinary domain, and once you have this mapping done of the industry, then we are able to pinpoint and predict those gaps which we can fulfill, especially in times of contingency like a conflict situation, and that helps us to kind of monitor what kind of shortfalls we will be in terms of industry, in terms of technology. So thank you for that.
I'll just add to it also. Since I am still a CII employee, I'm still part of the parent organization. So whatever I have suggested also right now, that in the responsibility also incumbently falls on me to work it out. So it's a thing that I also take it up whenever I speak with my colleagues at SIDM. So it's a work in progress, and I'm sure that in the next few years we will somehow reach the goal that we are supposed to.
Yeah, here is another question. And this is question for Mr. Setia and Mr. Patnaik, both of you, that there is this thing called positive indigenization list, and in the previous session we were talking about the positive indigenization list being given out by the PSUs, that this components we need to indigenize, and we will for the list of the 5th positive indigenization list, I think 3700 components have been identified, which will do a import substitution of 1000 CR plus. So how, now this question is going to point to, on one side we are creating industrial defense corridors and we are investing certain amount of taxpayers' money. On the other side, to kind of import substitute a certain degree of the defense requirements, we are creating defense industry corridors. One of my question is that the current industrial setup, let's say in Coimbatore area, or let's say in Rajkot, or let's say in Maharashtra, there are so many IDCs, industrial MIDC and GIDC and so on and so forth. So instead of creating new defense corridor, where UP industrial corridor, definitely because of the huge gap in UP's industrial kind of coming up of age of the UP industrial thing, is there a possibility that we start a think tank or we start a dialogue on the industrial corridors already, IDCs already existing, and then kind of giving them a defense edge, and how do we financially justify it vis-a-vis the kind of the list of PIL that we want to generate, because eventually having these industrial defense corridors is all about fulfilling the country's requirements indigenously. So what are your thoughts on this? And this question, I think if Mr. Setia, they want, both of you, if you want to deliberate upon it, please feel free to give your thoughts. Should we spend money in creating new industrial defense industrial corridor, or should we kind of make the new existing industrial corridors into a defense entity? Please, sir.
See, I'll share my limited understanding of what these defense corridors are. Of course, you would have heard. See, the central government can only support, some focused projects. They cannot, distribute or spread their resources too thin. So Tamil Nadu and UP, both, reasonably well located, and they're extended corridors. They're not like one small cluster of land. They run across hundreds of kilometers, if not, thousands, hundreds of kilometers. So from that perspective, that is the right approach, because then you can build clusters of factories that produce the output. But if you actually see from technology perspective, which is where we invest, and a lot of these, a lot of the new venture capital money is going to go, a significant part of it, I would say, is in tech space. And if you look at tech space, you have these, same old suspects. I mean, you have Bangalore, you have Hyderabad, you have Pune. And then you have NCR coming, and then you have very little, but if at all, coming in other parts of the country. Some in Kerala. We have funded a company in Odisha, so and so on and so forth. So you would have innovation coming from all over the country where the talent lies. And Bangalore had great software talent, great, aerospace backdrop, engineering backdrop. So it automatically also encouraged a lot of startups to, set up shop there. So to me, the two sides, one is manufacturing and second is innovation. Innovation will happen around incubators like IITM and IITKs and, other incubators of the country. IIT Delhi is doing a fantastic job. Then early stage companies will congregate around the talent profile that you seek. And manufacturing will happen based upon the incentives that the government gives and where it is most economical to produce. And hence that is the triangle that I see. To answer your question, if you actually see what Gujarat government is doing, what Andhra government is doing, what Tamil Nadu government is doing, each of them understands the importance of defense capability, building defense industry in their respective states. So they're competing, which is a very healthy thing. So you have these two very large, I would say ideas, but very large programs around defense industrial corridors. And then you have a lot of state projects, and then you have a lot of natural pockets of excellence. And I think that's a very natural model to that will evolve with time. So if you have corridors coming in other states, it will come because the states want it to happen, and there's a genuine commercial reason why it should happen there. So I won't say that government has to do anything more beyond these two corridors right now. There will be, and you'll see more corridors coming around semiconductors in Assam once the fab is there. You'll see corridors coming around West Bengal if one industry moves there. Much like what you saw in Gurgaon around Maruti. So happy to hear Avnish's point of view on this.
Yeah. And also to Mr. Patnaik, I'll also add one more line that as an initiative, Mr. Patnaik, would you like to just kind of have a cell set up from the SIDM side in those recognized tier 1, tier 2 defense corridors where IDCs, the defense corridors are not existing? So a cell to have an existing industry corridor to be converted into a defense corridor, like probably centers of excellence started coming up or the innovation hubs started coming up in the IITs, which are the research institutions or the academic institutions. Similar cells could be introduced all across the country in the different industrial corridors. What do you think about this? Will it be supporting this? Please go ahead, share your thoughts.
Right, Duke. First is on the positive indigenization lists and of course the industrial corridors. I had the opportunity to be a part of some of the discussions when it was taking place initially, and happy to share that the first 3 to 4 indigenization lists were completely compiled by SIDM, and we worked very closely with the headquarter IDS. So it was a very close relationship, and that's how the first indigenization lists actually came out. Coming to the industrial corridors, see, we have to understand also what do you mean by an industrial corridor, right? If you look at the UP and Tamil Nadu corridor, it is literally a corridor, right? It's a road that goes in, and then there are various spots around it. The challenge it lies completely with the incumbent state government, because they have to convince manufacturers to set up shop over there, and many MOUs and other things have been signed in that accord. But any investment, of course, depends on what sort of orders that you get. I think I recall BAE Systems had signed a big MOU to do something in the UP corridor, but that is also dependent upon BAE Systems getting the artillery orders. So another example of the corridor success is the AK 203 Kalashnikovs. So that is again that is because there's a huge government order behind it, and the MOD and the Russian government are behind it. So any success around the corridors depends upon the orders that are there, and of course the ecosystem that exists. UP is still evolving, and and we know colleagues in our the UP corridor who are trying their best to get things moving. I'm pretty sure they will succeed on these aspects of how the corridor actually coordinates with the industry and various other agencies around the world. This is where actually, we as SIDM have played a role. It does not come out in the open, right? So I used to take delegations to the UK, to the US, to France, right? So everywhere we used to pitch on behalf of the corridors, right? We used to give the initial pitching, and sometimes we used to have representatives from the corridors there also with us. So, that's how we created the idea of promoting India and the corridors around various countries. But eventually it depends on the orders that you get.
Yeah, so second question was that how do we create a cell? And along with the second question, the third question has also popped up, that how do we create a cell, just like IITs are into research, so how do we create a cell within every industrial corridor to promote defense manufacturing, let's say? I mean, somebody came, in the top management or a top institution, they said, hey, we are coordinating with IITs, let's set up a center of excellence for XYZ in this IIT. Similar way, how long are we going to wait that somebody comes into the picture and said that, okay, there is a good GIDC, Gujarat Industrial Development Authority is there, or there is something in Maharashtra, then why don't we set up a cell there to promote defense manufacturing, to promote a will for the manufacturers who has, let's say, a 200 crore furnace or a forging plant or a some kind of a thing to tilt towards defense manufacturing. This is first part, and second part of this is, when we say that we are going abroad to pitch India as a destination and we are talking to other vendors, why don't we also internally promote to the state governments that, hey, there is money to be made in defense manufacturing? So we are pitching ourselves out, our country outside, but is there a defense promotion board which also promotes defense manufacturing to state governments internally and tell them that this is your budget, why don't you invest in defense manufacturing and this will be your outcome? So these are two questions.
See, first is creating these cells in various IITs or educational institutions. Two things. One is the Army already has these Army technology nodes, which is coordinated with the Army technology with the ADB, Army Design Bureau, at its headquarters. And the role of the technology nodes is to work with various ecosystem players in the region and tell them about what are the emerging needs of the Army, and then have these conversations around how manufacturing could be tilted. So that is one part that the Army is doing. Navy and Air Force, I'm not updated yet, but when I was in SIDM about a year ago, there were discussions on creating similar nodes as well. I'm not sure where it is right now, but the Army already has these things going. Two is, whenever a cell or anything that is created towards defense sort of manufacturing, we have to understand as an ecosystem and as an industry, what is defense, right? Again, coming from the commander's view is that even right now we don't understand what defense is, right? In defense manufacturing there can be so many things, right? From even food, right? DRDO has a laboratory on food, right? So what exactly do we want to focus on? And it requires some help, some guidance in that. So the services also have a major role to play in all of this, and it's not an easy job, because these discussions we have had, and same questions also, Duke, we have had through 6-7 years while we were there in SIDM also. It's a complex problem. It cannot, it requires a lot of political will. Of course, there is political will, but of course, systems and people coming together and actually working on a certain project and on a certain area. Again, in my opinion, for example, IIT Delhi should focus only on quantum technologies. This is just give an example, right? So in IIT Delhi, then you're creating a sort of a quantum hub. IIT Chennai can be on drone technologies. IIT Bombay can be on something. Other institutions can. So then, then there's some focused energy going towards. Otherwise, we will be all over the place. So that is on the cells. Or see, on the state governments, we are a federated structure, right? Each state government can do on its own. See, again, as SIDM, this was our role to work with the state governments also, and we have been doing so. We worked with Rajasthan, we work very closely with Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. We have an MOU actually with the Tamil Nadu industrial corridors. With UPIDAC, or SIDM has MOUs with the state governments also. So as industry representatives, we can tell them what are the opportunities, and we duly tell them. Post that, it is their decision on how to navigate that, right? For example, I'm from Odisha. I'm sitting right now in Bhubaneswar. For how to navigate the defense opportunity in Odisha, SIDM can give a broad overview that these are the opportunities. Post that, the system itself has to create or get a consultant to create schemes and policies which they do. Like for UP, I think PwC is the consultant for their corridor. So ये सब हो रहा है in the system. It's not that it's not happening, but it's a time taking process because we are in a federated structure.
Thank you. This is excellent. I'm glad that we are making strides, and we need to bring this dialogue more closer and probably have more cadence. So Commander Kaushik sir, I have a question on the similar side.
So let me go back to the same thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'll just take a step back and try and understand what is exactly a defense tech is looks like, right? So when we are talking about positive indigenization list, what is positive indigenization list? Basically, you already have a tech, we already have some equipment which you are imported. Now you're just trying to, recreate it, because either the supplier has, shut shop because it's quite old, right? Or the price point which is coming is much higher, because when you're importing something, actually you're paying the cost at least 5 to 10 times of what you could actually create on your own. Maybe on the base of an IP or whatever justifications can be there, definitely, because there's a lot of R&D which goes into it, right? So positive indigenization list comes from a state of this thing that, okay, I'm reducing cost somewhere and we are developing a certain part of technology, and this becomes your building blocks for creating a new tech. Now, till the time you're going into positive indigenization list, you're playing a catch-up game, right? You're just creating what you are already existing. Now you have to look at the next part of it, right? The new tech. A typical, defense tech would be a combination of various different techs working in tandem together, right? And that tech, when you go into a typical industrial corridor, each manufacturing is happening close by. You can talk to each other, you can do multiple iterations, someone can take a lead, and that's where you're creating an ecosystem where you're creating new weapons, new sensors, new technologies for defense, which it can have a multiple use cases. So coming from the positive indigenization list, you save money, whatever you're bleeding to the the rest of the world, you take that money, put in the corridor, and where you develop a new tech, and then you can actually start looking for exporting that tech. Now, ambitions have changed. Today, like what we are talking about today, all this conversation is happening because the ambitions of the nation has changed. Now we have realized the importance, and we believe that we are now just at the cusp of it. So that is where you need to focus on industrial corridors. It is required. And your point being that, at every, good university or a state IIT or something, you should have a defense, interaction. Trust me, today, like Avinash was saying that, Avnish was saying that you already have ADB, which is already, interacting. You have DIO from Navy, Air Force has all the similar cell. So all of us are actively engaging. Go back 5 to 10 years back, like I was with MOD, I was with Ministry of Defense. Talking outside of defense was a difficult thing. Even if I knew, I couldn't just say, right? Today, they go out and they talk about it. What do we need? What is that we are looking for? And that changes because a lot of time technology is already available in India. There are times when we are buying a technology or buying an equipment from abroad which has been made in India and send it to them, and then it's coming back to us at probably 10 or 20 times the cost. So once your needs are understood by the civil industrial corridor, it's just a tech. At the end of it, a lot of tech is about mixing and matching and creating a new product.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Commander Kaushik sir. I have a question regarding some of the back when I was also doing some work. A lot of vendors, and this question is probably because of your position with the TDB, there's a lot of component requirements for machining and forging and so on and so forth. And a lot of vendors, they could have become defense vendors from normal metal fabrication if they had certifications like NADCAP or AS9100, and they are hesitant from getting into those certifications because they have been sometimes like a family run business, 2 generations, 3 generations, and they know it by the back of their hand that this is how it has to be done. So they don't invest in documentation, and this unorganized industry has been both an opportunity because India has been a big unorganized sectors, and aggregator platforms have come, whether you talk of taxis like Ola, putting unorganized sector into organized sector. Is there a way that we can think of getting the huge manufacturing setup from India to get into a defense mindset just by helping them to get those documentation standardization mindset? Can we simplify this? Do you see a business potential, and would you be investing in a business platform like this which creates standardization and which thinks that okay, here are 10,000 manufacturers in the state of, let's say, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and I am going to have a business plan. For example, I am an entrepreneur and I come to you with a business plan, and this question is also for you, Mr. Setia. Would you be interested in investing in a business plan which says 10,000 manufacturers, I am converting them from normal metal fabricators into defense ready fabricators?
So first, for me, as for the investment, probably not.
Okay.
Right, because I'm looking at it deep tech.
Okay.
This is aggregated platform. There are people who are better than me in this side.
Okay.
Means if you say Ola, Uber, Taxi for Sure and all those guys are much better in making this kind of a tech. It's just a use case which has shifted. Right. So that, no. Now coming to becoming a defense manufacturer. So most of the times you realize, like I was on the ship, right? I've operated and handled all the machinery. So it's the same machinery which is being used in the civil world. There's no difference. Only thing that changes is the quality requirement. Because we can't have a failure at a wrong time and away in the battle zone, because that could be a difference between life and death there. So therefore the quality standards when it comes to defense are much, much higher, stringent, and that's why the higher cost. So that documentation is a higher cost. Now coming to where the traditional businesses did not go for documentation, or they were, because the defense did not look like what you can say in the open domain. In past, defense was more of what you can say the closed-ended thing where you don't know, like I said, black box. You don't know what's happening. You don't know whether you'll get an order or not. Is there a requirement? So why would you invest money somewhere where you have absolutely no clue whether my product is going to go or not? But today, with the current ecosystem and the push from the government, we typically call the tailwinds, and also the current geopolitical scenario, you realize that there is a huge opportunity. Like I said, when you're importing, it's a typical defense is a seller's market, right? Somebody wants to sell it to you or not sell it to you, it's his choice. Buyers are, you will never get the best of the product. Now that is, you realize that when you do that, you're actually buying at 10 times, 20 times, or 100 times the cost. The same equipment which can be manufactured at probably a 1/100th of a cost.
So this is the where the bottom profit line lies. That if you are in defense, you can sell something for 20 times the price. Is this itself not a very lucrative thing for any seller?
That is true. That is absolutely true. But the point is also that there has to be a door open. If you don't see an opening, I'm not going to go there. I put an investment, I don't see an order. Now what is happening is, with the current push and the supply chains being constricted and everyone being very, very aware of your vulnerabilities, there's a huge focus on this. And now is the time that you can invest for getting your quality assurance and the certifications, which will help you get those orders and at least make you bid for those orders. Because defense orders are generally huge. They had decently good margins, and I'm not saying you have to quote 20 times. I think even in Indian context, even you should double. It's quite good for that.
Thank you so much for your response. So, Mr. Setia, the same question I'll come back to you with, that if there is a proposal and this gentleman's, it could be me saying that, okay, my target is that people who are into manufacturing at 50 to 100 CR, I want to shift them from whatever manufacturing them into defense ready manufacturing. And this is the list of indigenization, this is the business plan, this is the TAM of it, and this is probably some ROI where we probably can consult from SIDM that what could be the potential. What would make you consider that investment? Will it be a straight no, or you would want it to be fine-tuned to a certain thing, considering that India is one of the largest unorganized market sphere because of the haphazard rate of industrialization? What do you think is the business potential in this idea?
Okay, let me answer this question purely from MGF Kavach's perspective. We are an early stage fund which invests only up to a certain amount for a certain purpose, and we have a thesis. This scenario, I'm not the one who can comment immediately if it's lucrative or not, but certainly does not seem to fit the thesis of an early stage fund where you are helping somebody, pivot from manufacturing civil product to a defense range of products. So it's like any VC fund. First and foremost, we have fiduciary responsibility towards our investors, and as a thesis, we have chosen to deliver the returns that they expect through critical technologies, including defense. So the answer from that point of view would be no, from a pure MGF perspective. What is that an opportunity? I think it's more left to the entrepreneur. If there's enabling environment and if somebody is producing 1,000 crores worth of industrial goods, I can assure you they're already looking at defense as a way to diversify. And I know for sure because many of our investors are strategic in nature and they're looking at diversifying into defense manufacturing and they're assessing. And some of them will probably eventually end up doing it. Some of them may not choose to do it. And I'm sure there are others I don't know of who are thinking on the same lines. So it's... To me, I take a capitalistic view. If there are enough nudges and enough incentives, people will shift towards, diversifying their products, because everybody knows defense has high margins. But the efforts required and the risks required to build a business and generate revenues must match with the risk appetite of the manufacturer who is already an established player. There has to be a opportunity switch advantage.
Okay, perfect. So since I have the very good opportunity of having a think tank unto himself, from CII, Mr. Patnaik, Same question to you, that if the mandate, or if you create the mandate that okay, let's take a region and let's get 1,000 manufacturers from normal manufacturing to defense manufacturing, and you create a curriculum, that a curriculum where we help them to assess the defense market, what is the size. So the first part of the curriculum could be giving them how tantalizing the market could be. Then second could be what could be the hiccups, kind of more, if we can create capsules of whatever hiccups they can be having. It can be regarding certification, uncertainty, the gestation period of getting the first order. Do you think it's, or are there already programs under SIDM or CIIs already contemplating such programs where we help a manufacturer transition from their domain into a defense domain? Because right now, as we have two of the VCs saying that it's not lucrative because the ROI is not very well defined, is what I understand. So what kind of role CII/SIDM can play in enabling such a structure which is enabling further people?
My answer again would be very short. This is a problem that CII had identified in its earlier avatar in through its defense team also. So I think we had launched. This is the only course that exists in the in the industry. It's called the Defense Acquisition Management course. It was, I think, organized in the early 2000s, and this is when the defense sector was just coming about. So we had we had someone from the acquisition wing, retired, who came in and who used to organize and take this course for over 3 days. And this has been going on for the past 20 years or so. And as process in SIDM, we do this every 6 months or so. Mostly it has happened in Delhi, and now we are taking it to various places. And whenever we do so, it's always jam packed. So the acquisition course actually tells you everything about the sector. What are the various agencies? What is the system like? What are the ecosystems like? What are DPSUs? What are their modes of acquisition? So right from your big boys, for the big OEMs, to the MSMEs, and even to startups, it gives you them a complete overview of how to navigate in the system. And that is where, of course, as CI and SIDM's role would also be limited to some way. Our job is to impart the knowledge and tell you what to do, how to do. After that, you have to do it. So and through these courses and all, many people have benefited, particularly at the managerial level, who have understood the ecosystem quite well. So there already exists, to answer your question, there already exists something like this, and it's quite popular in the system.
Okay. So that's a great missing link. So I have another question, for the VC panelists, So management institutions, what role can management institutions play in creating the human capital? We have technology aspect, but just like we have hospital management, retail store management, every kind of management courses are coming up. How do we create human capital required for for defense production requirements, because the business is booming? We are already doing defense manufacturing worth 85,000 crores, Commander Kaushik, if you might be able to. Yeah, and we are touching 25,000 CR in exports. So when is the MBA coming for defense production, or when is the human capital requirement will be met? And do you see a need for it?
No, so okay. So first, I'll go back and correct the first one which you were saying. So between me and Raj, we did not say we are not interested. We will not fund that, and the money will not come into this thing.
Okay.
What we are saying.
Thank you for changing your mind.
No, I'm not changing my mind. What we are saying is, for our fund, every fund has a thesis, right?
Yeah.
Every fund invests into something, right? There are funds who will invest in that if you are able to showcase that there is a business case for it. What we said is, we don't, because we are not looking at that sector. That's the clarification on the last one. Yeah. Now, coming to this point of having an MBA, I don't know. Again, degrees are degrees. I totally agree that there has to be a certain structured form of it. But a lot of things are changing on ground, and the most important part which is changing now is a lot of internships which are coming at in the college level, and they are now serious internships. Like earlier, people would just go on a leave and then do nothing, enjoy. And I'm not saying you should not enjoy. I'm definitely not one of those that who says you should keep working, because there's a balance which you have to. But now when the internships are there, that is where people are, kids are learning your basic skill set which is required by the industry. Like you can have a lot of degrees, but you still will be unemployable, because you actually don't know what is required in a business. You don't have a mindset. You've never done practical work in life. When you're doing that internship and under good companies, and there is a mentorship there. So that is the important part. And in the defense sector, there is a push. So MBA in defense production, I'm not very sure, because I don't see a production too much of different. But yes, defense quality control can have one of the things. The various, actually, I can't even say defense quality control. Quality control covers everything. It is, you just focus on certain parameters which have to be checked more rigorously in defense cases. In civil cases, they are relatively easier. That's it. So, do I see a need of more education on this part? I think it can be formalized, but I think more will develop within the ecosystem itself.
I'll try to substantiate with when we say formalizing. You have been mentored to many startups.
Yes. I understood that point, that you can have an entrepreneurship course, right, at a college level, at maybe even a postgrad level, where you are understanding when you are building your startup, what are the things you need to have, right? The basics of your compliances, your Companies Act, the basics of your finance management, the basics of your human resources. Because this actually, a lot of times what happens is the founder may have some amazing tech, but they get bogged down by all this. So if somebody can teach them at an early stage that, you should be looking at it. So you ask the right question when you have a employee or someone, you know what to ask.
So here is my question regarding mentorship and formalizing. And so mentorship is like finding a good marital match, which can be a hit and miss. But when you formalize the thing, whatever, let's say there is a great promising startup, and Mr. Setia, this could be also for you. A lot of startups come and they kind of bump through different advisors, different mentors before they find the right handhold. Otherwise, it's a first come, first serve basis. And a 25-year-old young entrepreneur might not have the right psyche. He might have a great product, great vision, how to pitch, what kind of user cases to build up, what could be the hiccups he should try to sidestep. So how do we formalize that, and have you kind of come up with certain FAQs in your own firm or in your advisory position that, okay, these things, because eventually this FAQs eventually become a curriculum into itself. So how do we bring the right mentorship to ensure that the number of startups coming out of India takes gets a bounce?
So you're absolutely right that the match between a founder and an advisor is something very important. Now the onus lies on both of them, because a mentor will also not know without getting into the company or understanding the company that what are the basic needs, where are they lacking. Because something where you're strong, maybe you don't need an advisor there. But where are you weak is where somebody can give you an overview or handhold you for a certain duration when you get out of it, and then you can hire people for it. At the same time, it's also the founder who also realizes that what is he looking for a mentor for? What is his role going to be? Right? Sometimes you need a mentor. Like tech, you're pretty good, but you don't understand how to manage finance. So you will need a kind of a financial management mentor. Maybe you need a marketing guy because you have not been in the marketing. You need someone who has that kind of a connect in that particular ecosystem where you want to enter. Right? So let's say I said tech is a value, and then tech has use cases. Now when you're going into a defense, this thing, you need someone who has a defense kind of a understanding and probably a network there. When you go into a, let's say, medical domain, or the same tech goes into a medical domain, then you need someone who understands the medical domain better, and he has the connects out there to get you the right set of advice if he doesn't have, because no one mentor can have all the advice. So it is about getting the right people at the right point of time, making a good team along with the mentors, good mentors and a good team.
Perfect, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Raj, I have a question. You have successfully funded very interesting startups, Galaxy and then Eon Systems and Inspacity. So has there been a role for these startups in the Operation Sindoor? And when you fund space startups, you also somehow venture close into the Deftech ecosystem. Space and defense there's a little bit of overlap. So has there been some success stories that you want to share with us?
Yes and no. Yes, because I know for sure, a couple of startups got called in for advice, and one of them actually participated in supporting the analytics. But I'm not allowed to disclose that, nor am I fully aware of that because it has not been disclosed completely to me. But I'm aware that our startups are already contributing, both in terms of on-ground operations. We're contributing at the time of on-ground operation support, and more so in terms of planning for the road ahead based upon the learnings that the defense ecosystem has had from Operation Sindoor. So that's and I'm very proud of that. And personally, like any Indian, is very proud of the fact that our young startups are able to contribute at such young age. Some of them are very young, some of them are young, but younger than me, of course, but with some experience.
My last question to you, Mr. Setia, is that after Operation Sindoor and the success that we are having, have more LPs or investors showed interest in joining your fund? What has been the
The short answer is yes.
Okay,
There are
that's a
a
sweet
lot
answer.
more. Yes, there's a renewed momentum. There was always some amount of interest, but there was some trepidation because people are little risk averse, especially when they have multiple options, especially when Indian listed market and public market has given such fantastic returns over a long term of 10 plus years. So, but there's a renewed interest, and there's a lot more inbound queries, and some of it is also converting into investments in our fund. This was one reason, and of course, to be fair, I would not say this was the only reason, because some of the things that we are doing today is an outcome of what we did for the last 6 to 12 months. This was one of the reasons why we actually thought we have to increase the size of the fund that we initially targeted to close at.
Okay. So thank you so much for this. Mr. Patnaik, I have one last question for our wonderful session. I really enjoyed having all of you here. Are you going to use the opportunity of our success in Operation Sindoor to capitalize, on this and get more people to invest in VCs? Are you going to make a showcasing and getting more VCs to invest as well as more investors so that this ecosystem gets lifted from all sides? Is SIDM and CII going to play a role and capitalize on this opportunity to get more of the investors, technocrats to be, coming into the DevTech field?
Yes, short answer is definitely yes. But again, I would take you to a few instances. Right, one is Kargil, right? So Kargil actually accelerated many of the conversations around defense manufacturing and indigenization. So that's when in 2001, when the sector was actually opened, right? So there was a causation and an effect towards it. Galwan and the present sort of crisis, in my opinion, have given the next set of boost that is required. In the media, you would have seen that many media channels, they said that the Indian manufacturing is coming of age and this and that, and this is the moment manufacturing is going to grow. But I would tend to mildly disagree on that, because this happened 20 years ago. I mean, we started into actually 2001 and 2, and we have been growing since then. So that momentum is there, and definitely there's push from the entire system. Coming now to see investors and VCs, and I've been part of multiple dialogues with the American, with the French, with the British ecosystem on investing. I think as VCs also, uh, again, just my personal opinion. I think there should be a course for VCs to also understand the defense ecosystem. I think many of the VCs still don't understand the defense ecosystem in depth, because it is complex. It is not easy. How the MOD operates, how the Army operates, how the Air Force and Navy operate. Then the DPSUs operate in a different way. DRDOs operates in a different way, and all of them have a very unique business opportunity if you go by their own systems also. So the system is complex. So for a VC, if I'm now in my role in Singapore, in Singapore you throw a stone and there's a VC. So conversing with all of them over here, the learning that I have had also is that if I'm spending 100 crores or 200 crores or even 50 crores on any sort of business opportunity, I need to know where my return is coming from. In defense, that is not very clear when or how it will come. But if you understand the ecosystem and how it works, then putting in that money will be much easier. For example, if I was a VC, if I know that once an AON is announced, after 6 months, the RFI will come. After that, the RFQ will come. Then the trials will happen. After trials, an order is given. Now, I know that, okay, this is the process, there's the money I need to put in this, and this may be the returns that come out of it. Then decision making just becomes easier. And this is just one aspect that I'm sharing. There are multiple aspects that the VCs and the ecosystem players need to know as to how the Indian defense ecosystem operates. It is very different from US DoD. It is very different from France. It is very different from the UK. And I've worked with all three governments. So our system is unique because of our history. I don't dismiss it, but it is how it is. And the ecosystem is working on refining it. But that being said, to really get investment into the sector, I feel the more outreach should be towards the VCs to make them understand on what's going on. Until that happens, I don't think we would get the required amount of impetus that is there. I know for a fact many of my startups, and in fact SIDM has a startup forum also. We started a few years ago. Many of my startups, they actually go to investors and teach them about the defense ecosystem on their own, right? And I know some of our startups, while they were in this phase, I won't disclose the names, now they have gone into major IPOs, on how they were doing it initially. So they were all, explaining the system, the process, what is. It takes a lot of time. But if you have a system where, the VCs are tuned what's happening, then it's much, much easier.
Yeah, so in the last couple of lines, I heard it. I couldn't avoid hearing it that this the VCs need to be informed of the defense ecosystem. So correct me if I was wrong. Do we see some initiative like this being drawn by SIDM or by CII, or would you consider recommending such a initiative to your parent agency or other relevant agencies, where more VCs could be gathered in a 1, 2 day, 3 day conclave and given not just 1 hour talk, but like 3 days conclave where they are meeting successful people who've invested, and also successful entrepreneurs, so that we build up a kind of a momentum. And this is a good moment. So I mean, Kargil was a long back. people who were born in Kargil, they are probably just graduating from institutions right now. It's a 2 decades is a long time to, probably we need to brush up. We need to continuously do these kind of activities. So do you think it's a good idea to host such a conclave where, just as what you mentioned, would be of interest? So this is my last thought for the day. Yeah.
See, conclave events and all, I'll tell you, we did the first national defense startup conclave in 2019 when, startups and defense were just being taking off. General Bipin Rawat had come for that program, and, he supported us quite a bit. Post that, of course, IDEX came up, and IDEX has been doing its annual summit also on defense startups, and many of these venture VC firms and other startups also come and speak on these platforms. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of you know Samir from New Space, and he's a fantastic speaker, and his ideas and thoughts are excellent in terms of how a defense ecosystem should develop. So these things have been happening, Duke. It is not that it's not been happening, but see, from my perspective as a non-profit professional and someone who has done done this sort of work, the real benefit comes from focused projects and initiatives. Platforms dialogues need to happen, that is given, you can't do away with it, but the real change in the ecosystem happens through when you create specific projects like our defense acquisition management course, right? That is one example. But to of course create and execute it, it's again, idea wise it's good, we must do it, but again it's an operational thing that the ecosystem will have to just figure out. When you're creating something new, I mean, I don't need to explain it, but you need more resources around it. So definitely that's something that we must do. But even if there let's say there are 10-15 VCs that come together and tell SIDM to create it, SIDM will do it very happily. But there has to be again that's an operational problem. It's not a conceptual or ideation problem. It's just an ops thing. We'll see how that evolves.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, I would just want to add up to it, like what Amnish was saying, that the first thing which happened was in 2019 when they started, right? So you give 6 years is a very short time in the VC ecosystem. People are getting to understand it's just opening up. So there are funds which are coming in defense, like Kavach being there, we being there. There's other funds which have been just registered. So there is a focus. Things are moving, and yes, with the Operation Sindoor, there is a awakening that we need to be Atmanirbhar, self-reliant, and we have to have our own equipment. So it's a very exciting time for this sector, and this sector will actually enable now a lot of other sectors, because the tech which will be developed here will actually have a lot of value in various other fields of our lives.
A lot of cascading. Okay, so with that, I really appreciate you joining us here. Thank you, Commander Kaushik sir, for joining us here in person. Thank you, Mr. Raj Setia, for taking out time, and Mr. Patnaik. It was very heartening discussion, a lot of insights, and we'll continue this dialogue going on forth at Sangam Business. Have a great day, all of you. Jai Hind.